The original Rat King stood out as an enigmatic and supernatural figure. He was depicted as a deity who oversaw the lives of rats. However, he was expelled from his pantheon, lost his powers, and was ultimately defeated by the Ninja Turtles. Though the initial character was mysterious enough, his subsequent adaptations into toys, video games, cartoons, comics, and comic strips further mystified his true essence. Today, I'll cover the Rat King as portrayed in the Fred Wolf cartoon, and delve into some of his most notable spin-offs. The character's original version was conceived by comic artist Jim Lawson in 1988. Within a year, this character transitioned into the toy line and was featured in the Fred Wolf cartoon. The action figure embodied characteristics reminiscent of its cartoon counterpart. It showcased a wild card persona, not siding with the Turtles or the Foot Clan. Represented as a homeless individual, he asserted dominance as the monarch of the ratocracy, striving persistently to rule the sewers. This iteration of the Rat King wielded a hypnotizing flute, allowing him to control rats, an instrument Splinter was vulnerable against. A nuanced detail which might have slipped past many young viewers was his affinity for the movie Willard. It was a 1971 horror film about a social misfit who got squeezed out of the company his deceased father started. Feeling lonely, he befriended a couple of rats and started raising them at home. The narrative arc of Willard sheds light on the Rat King's essence, an outcast finding solace with rats rather than humans. After a while, he trained the rats to do things for him. The movie had a sequel where Willard was even nicknamed King of Rats. The sequel, however, wasn't about Willard. It was about this rat named Ben. And just to drop a fun fact here, the song for the movie was Michael Jackson's Ben. Yes, that song was a sentimental ballad about a rat. Willard's relationship with the rats didn't end well, but when it worked, the character and the rats could understand each other. Echoing this sentiment, the toy line portrayed the Rat King as someone deeply connected with rats, albeit requiring music to command them. A similar narrative was evident in the cartoon episode titled Enter the Rat King. It was written by Buzz Dixon, and the character was voiced by Townsend Coleman. Since Buzz Dixon has no memories of his time in the cartoon, it is possible that the character profile was given to him by a showrunner. In his introductory episode, the Rat King kidnapped April after watching her do a negative report on the city's rat infestation. While caged, April discovered that the Rat King possessed a flute that allowed him to control rats. Upon discovering the existence of Splinter, the Rat King recognized the potential advantage of having a ninja master rat in his ranks. He proceeded to hypnotize Splinter to turn him against the Ninja Turtles. However, this plan failed. While April managed to free herself, she wasn't fast enough to prevent Irma from coming down to the sewers looking for her. From then on, the Rat King would cross paths with the Channel 6 characters in many of his appearances. Like the toy, this portrayal of the Rat King was also captivated by the idea of establishing a ratocracy in New York. But it would be crazy not to mention the main inspiration behind both versions of the Rat King, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. The comic book version was just an honorary part of the rat population and didn't really need to control his friends. But the toy and the cartoon clearly took elements from the legend of the Pied Piper. This influence was evident in his distinct attire and the flute's symbolic control over rats. It's noteworthy that the Pied Piper legend, although associated with rats, is fundamentally rooted in a real event involving the mysterious vanishing of 130 children that had nothing to do with rats. The rodent infestation bit was added a few centuries later. I'll let you do your own research on that. Incorporating the flute into the Rat King's persona aligns with a recurring theme in children's cartoons, adapting and innovating familiar fairy tale elements. But over time, the significance of the flute waned. Mirroring Willard, the Rat King evolved to communicate intuitively with rats. There was a reason for this as well. The Rat King didn't see himself as human, and being able to talk to rats reinforced this idea and could enable his delusion. One consistent element in his portrayal was the presence of his soda pop bombs, hand smoke grenades prepared inside soda cans. These devices were presumably crafted by the Rat King himself. Though largely independent, the Rat King occasionally aligned himself with the Turtles, especially when faced with mutual adversaries. The Rat King, much like his loyal subjects, always acted in the best interests of his mischief of rats. This survival instinct sometimes brought him into conflict with Leatherhead, while on other occasions, it spurred collaborations between them. In the episode Leatherhead Meets the Rat King by David Wise, the Rat King's ambition was to create a mind-controlling gas. He intended to alter an entire tanker truck of rat poison for this purpose. However, Leatherhead's unexpected intrusion into his domain led to a clash, drawing both the Channel 6 crew and the Turtles into the fray. By the time the Turtles managed to rescue Vernon and Irma, they found out that the Rat King wasn't exactly a master chemist. His formula for making human slaves of the rats was flawed, resulting in an unstable compound. The Turtles turned this to their advantage, forcing the Rat King to detonate his hideout. In the episode Were Rats from Channel 6 by David Wise, the existence of the flute was explained as a way for the Rat King to control bigger rats. It wasn't super clear, but after finding a very unstable version of the mutagen, he was able to transform Vernon and Irma into were-rats that would transform upon hearing his tune. By the end of this episode, Splinter finally destroyed the Rat King's flute. But did the Rat King need a flute in the first place? Was his sway over the rats mere rapport, or did it hint at latent psychic abilities? An episode titled Splinter Vanishes by Francis Moss and Ted Peterson hinted at this possibility, albeit ambiguously. In the story, Splinter abandoned the Turtles, telling them to part ways, all to fool the Rat King and Leatherhead to step out of the shadows and put their evil plan in motion. The villain's nefarious plan involved assembling robotic rats and alligators to seize the city. The two villains were able to kidnap all the isolated turtles except for Leonardo, who seemingly fell into a bottomless abyss. April, already aware of the villain's activities, came to their aid, supported by a timely reappearance from Splinter and Leonardo. Yet, despite their numbers, the heroes found themselves overwhelmed by the robotic onslaught. Splinter then channeled his telepathic prowess, rallying the rats against the robots and adversaries, suggesting that the rats might have been previously under some form of control. The two villains escaped and fought alongside one more time during the Night of the Rogues, the now classic episode written by David Wise. However, their role in the story was a bit more generic. Interestingly, the Rat King is seen with a flute in this episode, hinting that he might have crafted another. One could theorize that following his previous confrontation with Splinter, he perhaps lost his influence over the rats, but who knows. The Rat King appeared one more time in Season 8 of the show, but it would be worth mentioning that this is loosely considered the starting point of the Saturday Morning Adventures comic. While the comic will likely be its own universe, it is fun to see what Eric Burnham did with the character there. In Burnham's portrayal, exposure to an enigmatic gas stripped the Rat King of his ability to control rats mentally. Ironically, he gained dominion over the Turtles instead. By the story's conclusion and under incarceration, he seemed to have regained the allegiance of his rodent followers. An amusing revelation also emerged. The Rat King had a law degree. He also alluded to discarding his flute upon gaining his mind control powers, suggesting this event occurred after his debut. However, this is merely a divergent universe. As previously noted, his final canonical appearance was in the 8th season's Wrath of the Rat King, penned by David Wise. This story happened during the time Shredder and Krang were stuck on Earth, trying to get access to the Technodrome, which was trapped in a black hole in Dimension X. Shredder contacted the Rat King and made a deal with them to destroy the Turtles in exchange for a special mutagen that could allow him to create enormous rats. Rat King, now with confirmed telepathic powers, thought himself victorious in his confrontation with the Turtles, and returned to the Hall of Science for his reward. However, Krang needed to retrieve a powerful device from a high-security building, and he saw the mutated rats as a way of getting in. While recovering this device, Rat King learned about it and double-crossed Shredder and Krang. Fortunately, the Turtles had a retro mutagen weapon at hand, and reverted the rats back to normal. Shortly after, the Turtles defeated the Rat King and destroyed the device. Despite the Rat King's eventual imprisonment, one can't help but imagine that his furry friends eventually orchestrated his escape. Just like the Saturday morning adventures, there are other spin-off universes of the Fred Wolf cartoon that could give us some clues about what the people behind the scenes thought the Rat King was. In the comic strips, the Rat King didn't possess mental abilities, but relied on hypnosis, using a sophisticated flute given to him by Shredder and Krang in an attempt to control the country. What about the Archie adventures? Here, he bore the moniker Lord Hantan, reminiscent of the Hantan River in South Korea, where a rodent-borne virus was first discovered in the 1970s. Due to this origin, the hemorrhagic fever virus was termed the hantavirus. In any case, this Rat King variant had the power to mentally dominate rats, potentially giving him control over the city. Yet, in his solitary encounter with the Turtles, he seemed content ruling his sewer domain. Intriguingly, a century later, the Rat King remained very much alive, albeit aged. In this future, he clashed with the Turtles when Donatello attempted to rid the city of rats fleeing the sewers due to rising seawaters. The characters teamed up with Armagon, Verminator X, and the Shredder, but was defeated by the Turtles. He was set to feature in the Forever War storyline, but the book's cancellation halted this. The upcoming fan adaptation of the saga may shed light on the original plans for him, as it will integrate components of the initial plot. The Rat King also made appearances in video games such as Turtles in Time, the Super Nintendo's Tournament Fighters, Mutant Madness, and Shredder's Revenge. Notably, in Tournament Fighters, the Rat King could unleash a super move, creating an electrifying sphere around him. Additionally, the game's manual interestingly lists his birthplace as Greenwich Village, likely a colloquial reference to Greenwich Village.
Well, gang, it's been fun, but I gotta get back to the old rat race. Oops.
I know fans probably have millions of theories about his origins, but it's clear that an essential part of the character has always been his enigmatic nature. Like the Joker, his past is not as important as his future. The real puzzle is the inconsistent portrayal of the character. Was this deliberate, mirroring the comics, or was it due to miscommunication among the writers? Regardless, the Rat King remains a memorable villain of the show and an impressive action figure. There are more versions of the Rat King that I'll cover in future videos. I know fans have different theories about the origins of the Rat King, so this is your chance. Leave your theories about the character below, and I may pin the one with the most thumbs up. Thanks for watching.